Hey guys, my name is Chit and it's time to talk about the lens that broke the internet for anamorphic enthusiasts and dreamers. This is the first part of my review for the Sirui 50mm f1.8 1.33 anamorphic lens. Since you're here for the conclusion, I'd say yes, buy it. This lens is a revolution to anamorphic lenses the same way Blackmagic was a revolution to cameras a few years ago. It's not necessarily perfect, remember the comparison is with Blackmagic, but it's got many features that we could only dream so far in a very affordable product. The link to their Indiegogo campaign is in the description. If that's all the info you need, see you later. Please like and subscribe to the channel as I just saved you a ton of time. And if you want to know how I got to that conclusion, please stick around for a little bit longer. The hype around this lens started back in September when it modestly showed up at IFA in Berlin. From there on, as people picked up on it, the interest kept growing until mind-boggling levels, affecting the sales of adapters on eBay. Everyone is holding on to their money before committing to adapters now, because the Sirui might be able to deliver what we need. The lens is tiny but heavy for its size, weighing 570 grams or 1.25 pounds. Construction feels pretty solid, no plastic parts. The filter threads are 67mm, and both aperture and focus rings offer good resistance and smooth rotation. Aperture ranges from f1.8 to f16, and focus features markings in both meters and feet. And it goes from 0.85 meters 2.8 feet all the way to infinity in 140 degrees of focus throw. The biggest thing here is that you only need to focus one ring. This might sound like an alien comment if you're not used to anamorphic adapters. On top of that, all focusing is internal and it features a non-rotating front, which is great for variable NDs. Operated as a regular lens, yet get anamorphic vibes. Squeeze is 1.33 times, which is a great call for today's default 16:9 camera sensors. All you need to do is de-squeeze your image in post and boom, you get some vintage 2.36:1 CinemaScope aspect ratio right out of the box. And I say vintage because story time, around 1973, the CinemaScope standard was changed to 2.39 or 2.4:1 as the optical soundtrack was removed from film. The lens comes in 3 different mounts at the time of release. E-mount for Sony, MFT for Panasonic, Z-Cam, and Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, among others, and X-mount for Fuji. Before anyone starts complaining about EF mounts, this lens was clearly designed for mirrorless cameras. The EF mount requires 44mm between the mount and the sensor, that's called flange distance, while E-mount, for example, only has 18mm. If a lens is designed for a shorter flange, it can't be adapted to a longer flange unless you use special optics, and they always suck. Think FD lenses being adapted to EF through optical adapters. Anyway, I picked mine in E-mount because everything I shoot is on the Sony these days, so. The image circle is APS-C, or Super 35, and it doesn't cover full frame. Same thought process of the mount. Keeping this lens with a smaller image circle than full frame and a mirrorless mounts is key to manufacture and distribution at the price we're seeing. Speaking of price, there has been an initial confusion regarding the price range of this lens between $500 to $700. I guess Sirui decided to honor everyone's expectations in the end, and in some way by doing an Indiegogo campaign. The earliest batch was available for $549, which was an absolute steal. The next tier was $599, and the standard price for the lens is $699. The campaign at this time does not offer its standard price, just bundled with Sirui's gimbal, and you'll have to wait until it starts shipping in February 2020 from B&H, Amazon, or wherever they sell them. Now let's dive into the technical part. This lens is crisp beyond what I thought was possible. Razor sharp, wide open from center to corner at minimum focus. It also does something I didn't really expect. Performance decreases as we focus towards infinity wide open. We see some chromatic aberration pop in the center, and the edges get really smudged. Still, beats all other 1.33 adapters out there, and I wouldn't say this is bad performance. The label says 1.33 squeeze, but I want to make sure. So I shot 3 circles at different distances to check. I used diopters to force infinity focus and other distances onto my focused object, which is a lens cap. The reason I did 3 distances is because this lens focuses through a technique called synchro focus. This means that both the spherical and anamorphic blocks are being adjusted at the same time, and anamorphic fronts tend to get a lesser squeeze when they're close focused. So although the lens is indeed 1.33 at infinity, when we get to close focus, we are more like 1.26. If you're new to anamorphic shooting, you'll find it pretty weird to frame and focus the squeezed image. If your camera doesn't have a de-squeeze function, consider getting a small monitor that has anamorphic de-squeeze. There are lots of options in the $200 range. And if you're used to scopes already, 1.33 is a breeze. I can shoot like this all day long. Looking at this checkerboard, we can see the distortion profile is pretty controlled. 1.33 scopes only start to warp for real around 35mm or wider. Flares are sweet, blue, and super saturated. Terrifically sci-fi. There's not much else to say about these guys, I guess. Here's some bokeh samples going from wide open all the way to f16, so we can see how the out of focus areas behave. And since this is a 10 aperture blade, the oval continues smooth throughout the entire range, which is great. To judge bokeh and performance across the frame, I did this smooth pan, in which we can see bokeh is super smooth in the center and it starts to get cat eye towards the sides. A few folks have brought up the issue of skewed flares and footage, which means the anamorphic block is slightly out of perfect alignment. The lens doesn't offer any way of adjusting this from the get-go, but my solution was to loosen the mount a little bit and adjust it to perfection. More about this on my next video on this lens. The other bit where this lens takes some flack is coverage. Everyone goes crazy when a lens doesn't cover full frame apparently. Well, this one doesn't. It's APS-C or Super 35. You know what else is Super 35? This badass Lomo from Van Diemen. Do you see anyone complaining about cine lenses not covering full frame? So shut up. Thank you very much. Here are some comparisons. This is a regular 50mm contact size on full frame. When we crop it for APS-C, this is what we get. Then we have the Sirui on APS-C. We see a lot more on the sides. No surprise there. How does it compare to 50mm full frame though? Interesting. And this is how much the Sirui covers in full frame. To seal the deal, here's the Lomo Square Front 50mm on APS-C. And this is all three of them on top of each other on a 2.4:1 crop. I challenge you to find a more extensive test for coverage than this one. Now that we compared the $700 lens with the $15,000 lens, I feel we're in a good place for a conclusion. So let's start with the downsides. The alignment thing is a bit off-putting. A stricter quality control for this would solve the issue and boost confidence for buyers. And since we're talking about the look of the lens, I guess Sirui could enhance the typography work on this thing. It looks super generic and not representative of what it stands for when it comes to anamorphic shooting. So what does it represent? This is a full-blown revolution in budget anamorphics. It's groundbreaking. There has never been such a cheap and effective way to shoot scope since ever, I guess. And I'm the expert. I don't think Sirui was aware of how much of an impact this lens is going to have in the anamorphic market, springing competition at a budget level we've all been dying to see for years. It'll also drive down the prices of adapters and make shooters more demanding towards simplicity instead of hacked together solutions. As I said in the beginning, this feels like what Blackmagic did for cameras a few years back. The first Blackmagic camera was far from perfect, but they evolved into something amazing today. Here, I think Sirui is starting at a higher platform because they're doing a better job from the get-go. It's not perfect yet, but it's certainly on the way there. And this lens is gonna sell like crazy and drive even more interest into anamorphics. If Sirui stays on top of this, they can single-handedly explore this market before anyone else comes close. As for the Indiegogo campaign, for me, it feels too much on the nose trying to push cinematic into it. What is cinematic anyway? If you're curious about my take on that term that is so thrown around, there's an article linked in the description. That's all I have for today, friends. Thank you for hanging in there. And if you want to know more about anamorphic shooting or you just love my charming personality, subscribe to the channel and please like the video. I'm Mathieu and I'll see you next time.